What is poppin', gamers? Back today with another quickie, another short one that's sort of it the opportunity for this kind of presented itself. We have a funny little game that was weird and interesting to talk about, and that also fits the beach or our beach gen definition at least. It's a 2004 release, if I'm not mistaken. It's Mario 64 DS. And uh yeah, it's whether that's an interesting topic, like this may not seem interesting to you at all. Like how the fuck could how interesting could a DS port of this old ass game be, right? Maybe you're not sort of familiar with the discourse. Well, there is a lot of discourse around this game. You may be familiar with this old ass video from Game Explain ruining a classic, Super Mario 64 DS. Definitely fan of the inflammatory title. And then also there was like a recent viral like Twitter thing that a lot of us sort of became aware of. I think Pang to you that was like kind of intriguing, right?
Yeah, so I'd been planning this April Fool's review for quite some time. I did one like I think 2023 for Silent Hill. I was like, I need to follow that up with something. So I'd sort of decided on this. Oh, I'm gonna do one about 64 DS, how it's like actually the greatest. It fixed all the problems with the original game. Blah 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 blah. And so I'd been sort of like teasing out this bit in our Discord a little bit, like like workshopping it, and then all of a sudden, maybe like I've been playing it for like all of March to get the 100% and really nail down what my like quote unquote takes were going to be. And then all of a sudden, like 5 days before April Fool's uh on Twitter, just all of a sudden someone posts, and I think most gaming Twitter stuff that people post is fucking stupid. So I wasn't paying that much attention to it. But someone's like, "Here's my remake spectrum," and it's like the normal kind of thing you'd see on gaming Twitter. It's like you'd look at someone's opinion. It's like, how the fuck did you Frankenstein that opinion between all your 5 different synapses up there? And just it's muddled mess of contradictions. One of the things they had was DS. I think towards the far like this is the worst remake of all time end of the spectrum. And then so that tweet went viral, and then everyone had to get their fucking quote tweet dunks in and blah blah blah. And there was a lot of discussion on the game, and most of it boiled down to like really banal like surface level stuff. Is like, well, this 64 is or Mario 64 is like the most famous analog stick game of all time, and then it's just people arguing about that, and it's like there's so much more about this game that's sort of interesting. So I got sort of embroiled in this, and it helped me write my piece for sure. But then it's like, man, I have a lot of thoughts about this game. I think and I think I probably like it the most out of everyone in here. And I like the original more. I think no one in here would say the original is worse than DS, but I do find it. I think it definitely sort of needs its due for what it does right, what it does wrong, how it's sort of interesting as a remake. Thanks to that discourse, it had me think about the game a lot more than I probably would have just from a random one-off joke review.
You ended up writing a legit review for the game as well, right? And then it was like, yeah, this game has some stuff. It's got some routing. Like that wasn't entirely a joke.
I think, and we'll talk about when we get into the mechanics. But yeah, I've written a lot about how like in my joke review is like, oh well, this game has a bunch of routing with like how you look at the different characters, and oh you're using health as a resource to transition between characters. And it's a lot of like when I joke about this sometimes, and most of my joke reviews are based on this. When I practice I think I said this in chat the other day. It's like I think at least like based on the way I analyze games, like you can isolate objectively like every point of decision making in a game, and then whether that's going to be meaningful to someone is just completely more or less random based on their whims, right? And so there's a lot of points of decision making in 64 DS that I think are not that meaningful, but are very funny. That there's sort of the ways in which they sort of reoriented how the game is played. Not to the extent it's still I think a relatively faithful remake. But yeah, there's some actual sauce. maybe not on the movement side, but at least on like I think some of the new additions are quite I took them rather well. I think there's a lot. There are very cool things that this remake does to keep it from just straight up being a DS or sorry from a Mario 64 port to DS. So I do appreciate it on that level.
Yeah, the reason we decided to talk about it is because in our circle, from all that, it sort of took a life of its own. Uh, a bunch of us just started playing it, seemingly like just in a very mysterious way. Hot Pocket, I think you didn't grow with either version of the game, and you ended up finishing DS before you even like seriously touched 64, right?
That'd be funny.
So maybe you've since like gotten a good bit into the original 64 and like into ROM hacks and all that stuff. Uh, do you have some immediate thoughts maybe on DS on both games, really briefly?
Yeah. I mean, the original I think is a really. I'm not really a platformer guy. I don't play that many of them, but I think it is a testament to the strength of the game that I've already put like 60 hours into the entirety of the original, like that original plus ROM hacks, and I could easily see myself putting in a lot more time because the movement is just so strong and everything. Everybody knows about the original. Everyone knows how good it is, but I think DS is like when I played it, I thought it was pretty okay. It's got some sort of blatantly stupid things about it, but it's like not knowing. It's sort of like you don't know what you're missing type deal. Or I think it's sort of competent on its own. And I think if the original didn't exist, people would regard it as like a great DS game. But it's really in juxtaposition that it's like, oh god.
That's the funny thing about it. Like you're like basically the only person on Earth who got to have that experience.
I'm not sure that's true. I know multiple people who have played at least 200 hours of SM64, ROM hacks, and they played DS first as a kid.
That's so funny.
There was a different server I posted the joke review in, and they obviously, I guess, didn't read very far. I didn't see the date because they started seriously talking about the game as if it was not a fucking joke. Much to my bemusement, and at least one person at server was like, "Oh, it's cool to see you write about this. This was actually my first exposure to Mario 64." So now, given that might produce some very strange takes or come from people with very different views of games to ours, but I think that especially if you're, I think, around our age or like younger 20s, like the zillennial era. Like if you had a DS or like I ran into this game first in daycare. We used to play mini games a lot, and I played around with a little bit with it there. I think it wouldn't be out of the question for you to play it. Now by this point, it's like a straight up curio. Like it's a lot harder to access the DS version than it is the original by this point, unless you have a Wii U or you can just a DS, which is not a lot of people have either of those, but which is sort of, I think, also led to its sort of mystique as a remake that it's sort of been abandoned in favor of the original, even by the creators themselves.
Yeah. And you were saying earlier that you felt the discourse was very weirdly reductive and stupid on Twitter, especially, and I would assume I'm strongly suspecting you mean a very specific thing about the game, which is that, as you may have noticed, you actually straight up said already that like, original 64 is the most famous analog game of all time, and you may have noticed the DS does not have an analog stick, right? And that means a couple different things, and it's a little more complex than you think.
This is sort of like the basis of the joke reviews, like the hinge point was that the Nintendo had fucked up the industry by adding analog sticks, and like there used to be and if anyone who like wrote these reviews is listening, I'm not like, it's not a personal slight, but I always found these kind of reviews funny. There's like I saw this a lot with Castlevania. It's like Castlevania is actually good because you can't the movement's so restricted. And it's like, which is a fair point. I think if that's the only point, not there's a lot that goes into the game other than that, which is why it's like I would say that something like Ghosts and Goblins is more like fun to me and probably has less restricted movement overall, even though and it still manages to like provide difficulty in a different way. But that's sort of a different topic. So I basically applied that reasoning to 64 DS, and I think when you actually get down to it, playing DS 64, you're if you do have the option to for analog control on the on the touchscreen, which in game they add plenty of little tooltips. Is like, hey, by the way, you should play it with the fucking touchscreen. And if we're being real, like if you want to get past the Bowser fights, you probably will have to do the little spin on the touchscreen, which is kinesthetically pleasing. I think that works okay for I didn't have to redo it recently because I obviously didn't redo those fights, but otherwise, if you're using the D-pad, it probably, and you're like a casual Mario 64 player, it probably is not going to feel that different. You probably will have to, you're not going to have the quite same, your turning angles are going to be a lot more coarse. I think that is pretty easy to tell. And so it's going to restrict what kind of movement you're able to do for sure. But at the same time, if you just play a little slower. Now, of course, to people who really love the original 64, I think hearing that is already making them rich. But that there's I'm sure as some of y'all can describe better than me, there's a lot of other reasons why you are sort of forced to play slower. You can't exactly take as many exploits, etc. It's not just the D-pad.
Evan, like the D-pad thing, that was kind of a sticking point for you as well, right? That the obvious limitation is, well, okay, you got 8 directions and you can't control the speed, right? Which that seems like enough of a discussion point already, but it goes a little deeper than that, right?
Yeah, so I think to compensate for the D-pad controls, and also just because this game came out quite a few years later, Nintendo changed a little bit. The industry in general did. They with Super Mario 64 on the N64, they did their best to make a game that they felt controlled well. For as far as 3D platformers were concerned, but and for somebody like me, it still controls excellently. But it is a sort of, it's a game where I can understand why there's people that go back to it nowadays and they feel that there are some oddities with it, or they have hang-ups with how strict certain elements can be, or how certain aspects might be a little more demanded. I mean, you see how all the modern Mario games, for example, with like when you do a wall jump, like you jump at a wall and then Mario slides down the wall and then you can jump off the wall. There's a bit of this delay that you have to wait for Mario to kind of cling to the wall, and then you got to watch him jump off the wall in order to do a wall jump in the modern Mario titles. And so, that's what you do in Super Mario 64 DS. And because the game uses a D-pad and you're just a little more limited in in general in the game, it's like, okay, it's not the end of the world, but it does mean that, one of your tools there is all of a sudden a lot slower. Not necessarily breaking the flow entirely or something. I don't want to make it sound like it's this major issue that cripples the entire game or something. But if you've played a lot of Super Mario 64, you know how fun it is that you can just wall jump, from almost any surface that the game deems a wall. And you can do so at some pretty crazy angles, and it's very immediate, it's very responsive, feels great to do, leads to a lot of fun little sequence breaks, and you don't really get that in the DS version. Instead, the wall jump just becomes a tool that you only really use when you have to, or in some rare situations where it still feels, simple enough to do in the moment that you just decide, oh, well, I want to get, to this very obvious, like higher platform, and doing a wall jump is like the quickest, most obvious way to do it. But in general, you're just not going to be thinking about that sort of those sort of creative options that your toolkit allows for, because everything, whether it's just the momentum you lose so easily in 64, in the DS version compared to the original, or how certain mechanics, like again the wall jump or the triple jump or the side flip, they're all very neutered in a lot of ways. The side flip, for example, you have significantly less control over how you can make Mario turn while he's doing the side flip. And it's a little less high, I believe. You don't get as much height from it, at least in terms of trying to land on a higher platform. Maybe Mario's like head still, reaches the same sort of height, so you can hit things above you. But as far as like landing on higher platforms, the side flip has been neutered a bit as well. And this just this discourages you from wanting to experiment, which to me was always the key to Super Mario 64's magic.
Yeah, to get back to the D-pad thing specifically, right?
Mhm.
Pocket, I remember you mentioned that you messed around with mapping the original Mario 64 to a D-pad, right?
I'm playing it the whole time.
And it's like it's not the same as the DS version, right? It's
Oh yeah, no, it's pretty playable. I mean, the jumps are going to be harder because you can't have as much easy precision, and like you're gonna it's certain jumps, certain tricks are gonna be way harder because you're not able to easily hone in on angles and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I need to talk about this because the people who talking about the D-pad thing, I think, are very not. I mean, obviously, we just talked about all that stuff, right? About the sort of core movement changes, which I'm
Yeah.
sure we're going to get more into later. The real problem is that they didn't fix the camera. The camera in the original fucking sucks so much. It's
Hold
so
up.
bad.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's so bad.
Whoa.
Every
Well,
every ROM hack made in at least the past 10 years uses a different camera called parallel camera that is much more similar to the Lakitu camera used in the Bowser stages in the original.
Yeah.
It's that, and it lets you use the D-pad of your gamepad to do fine tune angle control, and it's just so much unbelievably better. And the problem is that Nintendo really, the camera of original is like everyone complains about it. It's a known issue, and really they didn't fix anything. What they did add fine control in a way that sort of works, but also it will just randomly like violently move around sometimes when you're trying to do it because it touches an object. The reason they keep messing it up is because they're deathly afraid of the camera ever intersecting a wall and letting the precious player know, oh no, the camera's in the wall, you can see through the geometry.
It's strange because in Sunshine they just let you do it, which was like pre-DS.
Yeah, so
So-
I don't
I was
understand.
gonna say that was a very smart way of addressing the problem that even at the time most 3D platformers were still struggling with. So it's weird that they didn't try to use the same solution for 64 DS.
Yeah. Because if you let the camera go through the wall, you have much, much, much more control over, and it's more predictable. What are you gonna say, Peng?
I was just gonna say. I mean, I do think that when it comes down to, I think the DS camera is significantly better than the original 64 camera. Not, I'm sure the ROM hack one is better. I mean,
I agree.
It is mainly struggling in stages where you have like tight quarters. I think the big one, at least that it was bugging me on, was the Big Boo's Haunt, right? Because there you've got a lot of rooms, and even though it takes sort of like I use quotes here, but isometric approach that sort of keeps you out of the walls. It's still like, okay, you try to move it. The big thing where on one hand, I think it does solve a decent amount of D-pad issues because you do get not analog control over the camera, but you do get like 360-degree control over the camera instead of it ratcheting around. And it does let you you can sort of set your cardinals in such a way that you can do a set of movements. But of course, in the original, even though it ratcheted, you could still just arbitrarily move in any 360 direction. Like that wasn't an issue. So it is sort of on one hand, it's like it's sort of there to fix a problem that wasn't originally there. I do think the attempt is fine. And I'll just say what I played right alongside. I played a bunch of 3D platformers back to back on a whim. one of the ones I played with was Gex, and Gex reminds me a lot of some of the. I mean, it's much worse than either 64 port, but in that one you sort of see it's like comparing the cameras between those two, which the camera in that one has its own. It has like a bunch of different camera modes, and they're all pretty wonky. Like every time I think about 64 DS, like obviously I'm gonna compare it to the original, but I'm also gonna compare it to some fucking like mid. And that camera is significantly better than mid. Like it is annoying in a couple select cases. It is pretty fine otherwise, and I'd say it's probably better than the original, just on the basis of being sort of arbitrarily movable alone, right?
Alan, before I say my whole piece on it, maybe I'm curious to hear your perspective. You're a big Sunshine head as well, right? Like I'm not quite caught up on what your stance in the War of the 64s is.
Mario 64 was either my first or my second video game. I don't remember.
Oh shit.
And I didn't play DS until I was like 15. So I'm an OG 64 guy. I'm not like a speedrun poser for 64, but I did speedrun Sunshine pretty seriously for a long time. And those communities kind of overlap a lot. And I wonder if it's just due to sheer familiarity with 64 that the camera has like I it's hard for me to be bothered by the camera because I know what it's going to be doing most of the time.
That's true.
Ziad pointed this out to me. He's like, "Yeah, it's learnable. You know, you figure out what it does, and then you're good. And you sure what it does isn't always the, like you mentioned, Big Boo's Haunt. That there's definitely some curious angles in there.
Yeah, I can concede like Wet Dry World is another one with that at the top of it where it can fail fucking disastrously. I can concede on that, but
Matthew Matosis used that as an example, so you know it must be a problem.
Another Matthew Matosis W.
But I think that is a great word though, learnable. Like I think both of these. I think both of these systems are totally learnable. Like it's not a game breaking issue in either way.
Both of the cameras are, but at the same time, I kind of hesitate to use that as a defense more often than not, just because at least from my experience, look, I'm the sort of guy where any stupid bullshit in a game is learnable to me. It's like, like you can learn how to play Ride to Hell Retribution. So, does that defend it? Like I don't think the fact that you can overcome a problem magically makes it okay.
I think the defense of 64 here is that you can learn it for like the couple stages where it has problems, and for most stages it really doesn't. Like
sure, it's not a big problem outside of a few. That's true.
My perspective on it is that it is basically entirely reset angles. It's a limited set of angles that yes, some of them are really bad, but they're always the same angles. They're always consistent every attempt, every playthrough. Whereas Pang, I think what you said was really important, right? You can understand why they added this fine tuning of the camera, why that was necessary when the movement itself is limited. But god damn it, dude, like in practice, I hated it so much. It was a much more constant annoyance for me than literally anything in the original.
Well, they were so. Well, that's the thing, right? With the D-pad thing, you're putting more pressure on the camera because fundamentally, the way the movement works, you fundamentally need to be able to set precise angles. That's a central conceit of the game.
Yeah.
You can either do that through the analog control of the analog stick or the analog control of the camera.
Exactly. Because there's no. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I know this made me so mad whenever Hot Pocket said it, but you were describing playing a little bit like Tomb Raider.
I did say that once. I've not played the Tomb Raider PS1 games, but I look at videos of that, and it's like, oh yeah, this kind of looks like me when I was playing 64 DS.
I'm like, shut the fuck up. But that was unfortunately that is exactly how I was approaching 64 DS. I was, and I think, and that's what sort of even when I first played it, like 4 years ago, or like first like really played it 4 years ago, I was like, oh, this is, it's not as good as the original, but I do sort of like that it's been, in this strange way, been turned into this slightly more like it's a bit of a slower experience, and so that
Yeah,
sort of quote unquote fixed the camera for me. But if you're coming from the perspective of here's what I want this game to be, which
exactly.
I think that's a fair opinion in this case because it is a remake of another game. Then yeah, I can see why that would be a bummer.
Yeah,
For me, having shifted my mindset, it wasn't that big of a deal.
I think that's I really got that you said that. I think your willingness to accept that really makes or breaks the game. And like I was not willing to accept it. I was not willing to accept having to constantly babysit the fucking touchscreen arrow thing. And like how Pocket as you were applying right there, just with the level design existing as it is, if you're just limited to the D-pad, there's just going to be naturally a lot of situations where the default angles are misaligned with where you actually need to go, right? I think like Whomp's Fortress might be a good example where, okay, by default, the perspective is sort of at an angle, and if I'm hitting the D-pad like upright, I will probably go off course after a couple meters, right? So I have to do those like mini adjustments with the camera, and like again, it's this kind of thing that in my opinion, is way more constant and way more annoying than anything in 64. And that's aside from all the other shit that I don't like about the movement. I think in general, I was implying earlier, okay, you map OG 64 to D-pad, it doesn't feel like DS. I think, what they did is sort of, let's say in DS, you're walking forward and then you hit up forward. You hit up left on the D-pad, and there's just much more of a turning radius there. Like Mario takes physically longer to.
Yeah, he doesn't snap into different directions like he does in the original. I mean, you know how in the original, like if you're not careful, you want to do like a U-turn while standing still. Mario will do like the full turn. Like that's what he does all the time in 64 DS. That's just the norm for him for some reason. Maybe as an attempt to hide the cardinal direction limitation of the D-pad. They might have been trying to be like, look how smooth he turns. It's just like you remember. And it's like
that's the thing. I think what it's supposed to do is you could sort of imagine like, okay, I'm gonna sort of jitter between up and up left to sort of lock in on an angle, right? I'm not gonna fully commit to the up left. I'm just gonna teeter between those two to sort of simulate what an analog stick would do, and then that lets you get around having to babysit the camera. I think that's what they were going for, and like,
I think it's a fine idea. The implementation just sucks.
Yeah, the thing, I guess it's like it was the right idea for this whole thing. It just makes you question, okay, was porting 64 to the DS like a good idea in the first place? I don't know.
It wasn't. No.
I mean, I
was
think if it,
I was a little.
Go ahead.
Wait, can I just ask this because
no, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So when you guys are talking about like moving the camera a ton manually in 64 DS, were you using like the stylus, like the touch screen stuff?
Oh, God,
I was using both the touchscreen arrows and I was using the L button.
Yeah,
I only used the L button. I don't think I've ever used the touchscreen, to be real. I don't even know if for a period of time I'm not even sure if I knew that was an option. But I've always stuck with just holding like the left trigger if I just want to recenter the camera, and that's kind of all I do for the camera. I don't really mess with it outside of like, oh, I need to recenter it, and that's it.
I will say that is another big boon in its favor is having an auto center. Like
that honestly might be why I don't really mind the camera that much in 64 DS, and why in some ways I'd say it's an improvement is because frankly, I mean, I just like that there's just a recenter camera button, and that's all I ever use. It gets the job done for me.
Yeah.
There are situations where it will, and then I think that on the walls, there are definitely situations where it'll like try to center that wall and sort of just put it in. It's like, well, I got it this far. Don't worry about it.
In that case, the N64 version does the same sort of thing in that sort of scenario. When, like, if you need the camera snapped behind you, both versions are going to fail you in the same sort of scenarios, pretty much.
Yeah,
you
but
don't need
then
it.
you have an analog stick, so you can work around it.
You don't need it. You
Yeah.
don't need
And
it.
then in DS, you're just stuck at this horrible angle.
Miyamoto's
Yeah.
vision was correct from day one.
But yeah, I mean, to me, but in the vast majority of situations where having the center camera is already enough of a boon on itself, it's like, yeah, I mean, when honestly, now that I think about it, like when I think I played maybe, I said like 20 stars of 64, maybe a month ago around the time I was doing the April Fool's review. I was the one thing that was just constantly bugging me was like, man, I really fucking wish there's like a center camera option. You can totally play around it, right? But I don't fucking blame it. It's 96.
Yeah.
Like there's
No,
nothing that was like later tech, by like 98 or 99. But like yeah, I do think that is a big win in 64 DS's favor. Well, a small one, I guess. It's not really the fucking point at the end of the day. Arguing the minutia of the camera.
The lack of a center pushes you to make more complex jumps, and that's why it's actually a good decision.
So
on 64
true.
DS.
So
It also maintains the cinematic flair of the visuals. It lets you experience the angles,
of a true 5th gen game.
the aesthetic and the level design from the angles that the developers intended.
Actually, a little like Eco, if you really think about it.
a little. This is like a precursor to
Ew.
Killer 7 kind of.
Ew. I think Gex might be a better game than Eco. I think I gave him the same score.
God, I cannot believe you guys. This is crazy. Okay. Yeah, I guess. So Evan, you touched on a lot of the other things that are sort of different about the movement. The side flip thing bugged me an insane fucking amount. I
Yeah.
should say, I think I didn't talk about it. Yeah, I grew up with the N64 version. I got an N64 sort of at the turn of the millennium. I did not. It's fun. Like we talked about, sort of. Okay, was porting Mario 64 to the DS a good idea in the first place, right? And my argument against it was like, well, it only got more obsolete over time. And like, as someone who grew up with the original, I was never interested in playing it. I'd never seriously played it until literally now. And
I played it. I played I played the DS version a fair bit when I get like just not that long after I got my DS in like 2005, I think. But that was just because I didn't have my N64 anymore at that point. So, that was what I had. That's the version of the game.
Yeah.
But then once Super Mario 64 got put on the virtual console, then
That's
it's
the
like,
thing.
okay.
Like
It's like, okay, I don't see a point of you. I don't see a use for you
at that
anymore. Bye.
literal point in time in that 2-year period, okay, I can sort of see it, but then the thing is, like, I guess what I want to say is, like, okay, I'm someone who I've developed sort of my own comfort and understanding of the movement, right? So to me, anything different in the DS version would be naturally very caustic. And goddamn it, the side flip thing, right? The way it works,
it's a lot harder to even just initiate one.
Yeah, so basically you have to initiate a skid by turning your movement the opposite direction that you're currently going. And if you jump during that skid, you'll do the side flip. But in 64, what was really cool is that you could redirect the skid in basically any direction you wanted.
Yep.
So you could side flip forward or side flip like, horizontally, like a 90-degree angle or something. And that alone gives you so much flexibility. And in 64DS, it's strange because like that still sort of technically works, except forward. You can't. You can, if you do the skid, you can like side flip. Dude, I'm bad at like fucking geometry and shit, but like, if you imagine like a circle, like the lower half of the circle, that will work. All of those angles will work. But anything sort of above that on the other half, that's a no-go. And that's just such an insane immediate knock against the game that again I could not really tell. But
so I'm just gonna give this brief little piece of history for those. I don't know if any of you know. You probably know, but just for anyone who doesn't know, Miyamoto's talked about Mario's various moves and the thought process behind making them in 64 plenty of times. And one of the things he said is that the backflip was one of the last things they added into Mario's toolkit. where you stand still, you crouch, and you jump. The reason they added it was because they felt that, stuff like the side flip or the triple jump, which were the main ways to gain extra height, to jump as high as you could, they were a little tricky to do. So the backflip is this slow, safe way to do that same sort of action. It just takes longer. Now, obviously, as a kid, I backflipped all the time. But as you get older, you play the game more, you start to use it a lot less. And nowadays, I hardly ever use it. There's really not a point to using the backflip. It looks kind of funny. It's cool, but, it just takes a lot longer to do than the other options. But I think it's a little telling that, at least for me, in Super Mario 64 DS, there are certainly times where I've just done the backflip because I kind of just didn't want to take the chance of trying to do a side flip and it not working.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of one of the more damning things, honestly. And now that I think about it, about the control scheme in the game, is that it's like some of the more advanced moves have actually been made less, not necessarily consistent, but just kind of less reliable to the average player. Like you'd really need to get a feel for how the side flip works in the DS port in order to feel consistent about using it. So you're just going to keep reverting back to the backflip every now and again, just out of safety.
It was kind of baffling to me that they made it more difficult because like you mentioned, it's like one of the more complex moves in Vanilla 64, and they make it harder from 64 to Sunshine. Sunshine has a lot of the same like core movement mechanics as 64, and then I booted up DS, and I was and it's like the thing every Sunshine speedrunner bitches about is, oh, you side flips are like a fake mechanic. And then in 64 DS they were even harder, and I was like, what, who, why? It was like corrosive to my hands.
I think that I was going to say that I just think that that is the one most obvious instance where the D-pad actually does make a big difference, or like losing those extra angles, because like when you because even I, as someone who's like, I've obviously played 64 in a fair amount, right? I mean, I've beaten the game multiple times, but I use side flips a decent amount there, and then I come over to DS and just, oh, you're slightly off from one of the cardinals, then you're gonna try to flip back, and then it's just he's gonna sputter in place or do a just neutral hop or something like that. It's like, this is not it's just it's very instantly. Now there's some other parts of the game that sort of you can tell that they were trying to reorient some of the harder quote unquote platforming over to like the other characters. I don't know if you want to move into that section of the, because if you do like say a Luigi backflip, it's like, oh, you can just skip like whole fucking parts of the game.
God. Yeah,
it is so fucking busted. I don't know how intentional some of the core changes were to reflect that.
Yeah, that's what I want to talk about. Because like the forward side flip is literally just not in the game, right? It's not even just, oh, the D-pad makes it hard. It's like it's literally impossible, and it makes me question, okay, was this like, this can't have been intentional? I think. Well, I mean, it doesn't really matter if it was, right? But like, I would imagine, okay, they just rebuilt it from scratch and then.
Because I'm playing. I booted up the game, and you can still do the forward side flip. I'm literally doing it right now. It's just because of the angle thing. Okay, what happens is if you get the timing wrong at all, who knows what direction you'll go in.
Yeah.
Like if you do the inputs very quickly, it's okay. But if you try to delay it like you can in the original, then it's all bets are off.
That might be the problem for me then, because
okay. Because like I think I
would usually use the generous like delay that you were given to like make it easier to redirect the side flip in 64. But yeah, you can't do that in DS. So I think at some point I probably just assumed you couldn't, honestly, because it just feels a lot less intuitive.
Yeah, I even tried it with spoil a little bit, the analog mod. You have a 3DS, and like I couldn't do it. But like maybe it's because I was using my 64 timing, so that's definitely news to me. Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot. I guess I'll wrap up like a couple other quick things before we move on to like content stuff. Thing in general, it feels like you lose a lot more momentum when you land. I think you notice this when like you do like some kind of melee attack in the air, and then you land on the ground, and you can't do a double jump after that. You can't do the silly kicks, for example, which is like that's like a goofy little thing. Whatever. Y'all might know this from when you try
the
to.
silly kicks have a purpose.
Okay, the silly
okay?
kicks actually
Let's
improve
let-
the level
They're so
design
thick.
of the game.
Let's not insult the silly kicks here, okay?
That's the thing. I was like, I didn't want to like overvalue it because like clearly it wasn't like intentional part of the design, right? But like
Oh.
personally, I do really like them. So not
They
having
let
them,
you skip a lot of annoying parts.
yeah. I guess it is interesting because you don't see this a lot in remakes where they do try to rebuild a pretty intricate system from scratch, and then they make like some conscious changes, and then some stuff is like just kind of weird. And then sort of the line between okay, how much of this was intended and how much of this was just kind of lost in translation, and then some stuff like the sort of the committal nature of the jumps and like the gravity that actually feels like relatively spot on, right? And I think a lot of that is what makes this game just so strange. Yeah, to someone who has a lot of familiarity with the original. I can't quite think of other remakes where they give me a similar feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when at least coming to this remake, it's like I would definitely concede that there are elements that I think it is probably a linear downgrade from the original. I would still stress, and this is why on my sort of reevaluation, I was actually quite positive on the game. I think having played a lot of other 3D platformers, it's still there's so much more sauce and just even this slightly neutered version of the original's mechanics compared to like almost every other 3D platformer.
For sure. I mean, at the end of the day, this is still a good game. It's still a good game. It has plenty of a lot of elements are still kept intact. Though maybe some of the things they added are maybe more of the problem. Might get to that.
Yeah, but enough about Resident Evil 4 remake.
I love that game.
We love that game.
The original, but I like it.
I know it's. Sorry, I just had to make that joke.
I know it's funny, but like, God, like the whole for this was the first time I actually beat the DS version. I did the whole 80 stars. The fact that 70 stars is not the campaign endpoint. The fact that they troll you with like, oh, you gotta get 10 more stars. That felt like the most cruel fucking twist of the knife. I was like, oh my god, I gotta play more of this.
It's good though.
No.
Talk with the new levels.
Oh, I actually did not. Yeah.
Someone should talk about the new levels.
Okay. Most of the boss ones are fine. I think the best one in the game is easily the Goon Boss one, which is like, oh, this is actually like little playground areas. Lots of moving platforms. Lots of little poison.
I actually did like that.
By all accounts, the Goomba King or whatever his stage. I mean, if you never played Super Mario 64, you could probably see it as like a C tier, D tier, level from the original or something.
Dude, what are you fucking talking about? Oh my god, I would fucking play the Goon Boss level over Dire Dogs in a fucking heartbeat.
You're right. I brought up C tier. It's an option. Okay.
B tier. It is a B tier level. It's a platforming playground. It's like that's already better than.
Okay.
It is. There's a lot of, and we'll get to this. On replays, the fucking some of the original level design is quite maybe noxious is too strong a word, but it's definitely like, what were they cooking? I think it is. As you know, the OG platformer, I think one that's all like near and dear to our hearts. There's a lot of leeway I would give it, but in terms of like the Goon Boss level being a good like, okay, there's a lot of moving platforms. There's a lot of different gimmicks in it. There's a lot of the red coins are laid out such that it's actually a good variety of challenges.
I didn't want to imply that it was bad or something, but I think it's solid. It's a good level. I don't think it's one of my favorites, but it's good.
No, and there are levels in the original that I think are better, but it is I think is better than a decent amount of content from the original game. Now the other shit, there's they plopped in some of the multiplayer arenas, and
they
those
sure did.
are they're there, and it is
Content, baby.
if you ever were wondering what it was like to, at least it's not like they didn't put in fucking bot matches. That would be
So sick.
terrible. That would be very funny if they did. But so they get these like really mediocre, actually probably even those are the actual like C or D tier like levels, and then
Yeah.
there's a couple other new areas that are there's the ones related for the Luigi and Wario unlocks. The Luigi one's like a cute little extension to Big Boo Haunt. The Wario one is like
Yeah.
sort of similar to Goombas, except it's a big line, which sort of limits.
It's a lot more linear.
Yeah.
But again, it's not bad or anything. It's
No,
it's
yeah,
harmless.
it's fine.
Yeah.
I think those are really the main new additions. Some of the levels received new areas, most of which are not
Well,
anything.
every
Yeah.
course received a new star.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they fucking
They put a new
they-
star in every level, and they tend to be very obvious in which ones were just slapped in and are the new stars, versus which were initially there in the first place.
Hey, bigger
There's a
number, better
couple where
game.
like they extend the level design a little though. Like like Womp's Fortress has like an extra part to its like lower
yeah.
level. That's fine. It it's another safety net, which makes sense for the
Yeah.
second level. There's nothing bad about it or anything, but also it's kind of weird because I think it's the last star that the game it's the last one for that course. Like it's labeled as the last one, but it's like it would probably be one of the first ones you'd find if you weren't on autopilot getting the ones you already know from the original because it's on the first floor.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the new stars are like they're silver stars, which are kind of weird because they're essentially like red coin missions, except if you get hit, you lose your red coins and you have to pick them up again. Not a particularly interesting idea.
It is funny that they move. They sort of bounce around on their own accord, right? And on the TikTok clock one, I went on the stage. I think I had it everything like I had the elements all static. So I went in the static version of the stage, and all of the silver stars, one by one over the course of 15 seconds, they all fell right on my head. I didn't move from the bottom. they all bounced down there, and I got this.
Yeah, I did it that way as well.
Classic.
I did it that way as
It
well.
is, and it was like, oh, okay. That was easily the laziest one to me. Some of the other ones are like fine.
Yeah.
And in that TikTok clock one of them got it. I think it fell off the top or the bottom of the map, and then it got stuck like really high up on the map after it spawned again.
So
I had to
sick.
use the stupid flower to get it.
He's so sick. That's good game design. That was emergent. That was emergent gameplay.
That was.
Yes, sir.
I think
certainly
the
emerged
worst thing you
something
can
with
say about these additional stars is I mean, maybe this isn't, this wasn't as big of a problem as kids, but we're all a little older. We don't want necessarily to comb an entire level for every single thingamabob you have to pick up. It's kind of nice how in Super Mario 64, despite being a quote unquote collectathon, um, you don't have to explore every single inch of every level in order to find all the necessary stuff. Outside of a few levels where the 100 coin count is like very limited, so you really do have to, scrounge up every coin you can find. Otherwise, you're given a fair amount of freedom in terms of like what stuff you can kind of just not bother with. There's a lot of not empty space because they still have enemies and objects and stuff, but it's just not mandatory stuff you have to get. And I've always liked that about 64 compared to like, Sunshine or Odyssey, where if you want to 100% those games, good fucking luck. There's a lot of bullshit you have to scrounge up. You have to search every nook and cranny of those levels. And so by adding an extra star on top of the existing ones for every level, some levels end up being a little closer to that slippery slope of making you have to actually traverse every part of a level.
The classic SM64 defense of you can skip it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you rather do though? That or Banjo-Kazooie, where it's like, dear fucking God, I have 99 out of 100 notes. Where is the last note?
No, the difference, the reason the SM64 skip it defense is acceptable is because what skipping it means in SM64 is actually, oh, I use the movement in an interesting way and
Yeah.
play the game to
Yeah,
not
it's
do
actually
this.
fun to skip.
the
Beyond
way
just the
I
novelty, it's just
Hold
fun
on a
to
sec,
do.
wait.
I was actually more referring to the just don't play that
Oh
star.
yeah, you just don't do the star. Yeah, I guess
No,
so.
that's not how we live around here.
Which
I
is
guess,
which
yeah.
is
They gave
the
us
argument
content, we will eat it up. We have
Which-
to.
the argument that's given over Sunshine because you can't do that there.
Oh, I see. Actually, this sort of leads into what I think is my actual, as a remake, what my biggest problem with the game is, which is that they didn't actually fix the problems of SM64 at all. Really?
Yeah, they
Have they
didn't
fixed?
address
Did they
any of
fix
that.
Dar Dar Docs? No. Did they
No.
fix Hasty Mage Cave Platform Star? No. Did they fix any number of these like stupid? Did they fix the stupid snowball rolling thing where it's very not clear what you're supposed to do? No. There's a did they fix Rainbow Road? No. And there's just a ton of examples like that where it's like, okay, this is a stupid section of the original that requires really weird, unintuitive things, or auto scrollers, or swimming, or whatever. And they and they didn't actually like touch any of that, but instead, hey, they added a new star at every level.
They could have at least had a half-assed solution for stages like Dire Dire Docks by just making the swimming a little quicker.
Which
Instead,
is
they
also
did the
a thing
opposite.
that is frequently done in
And-
mods.
yeah, instead they did the opposite, and they're like, "Here, play as Wario. He
Yeah.
swims slower. He jumps worse. He just does everything worse. But you have to play as him for a few select stars because he's the only one that can smash the black bricks." And now I'm getting flashbacks of Donkey Kong 64.
See, that's the thing. Like the fact that they changed some of the old stars to require the extra characters. Like,
Fucking
oh
lame.
my god, I want to say, I want to concede. Like, okay, I actually thought some of the additions were kind of cute. I think Pang was saying earlier, right? The way they sort of integrated Luigi into Busan was like kind of cool. Generally, some of the integration of those things felt pretty smooth. Oh yeah, the Luigi painting in the mirror room, for example, I thought that was clever.
Yeah, that's neat.
There was like a lot of stuff that surprised me in a very pleasant way. But then again, what I let in with the fucking God, like in Tall Tall Mountain, that whole thing, it's just so silly. It's just so stupid. Like,
It's very menu.
Yeah,
it's not very
isn't
hardcore.
one of the stars in Tall Tall Mountain? They just like it's the same star, but they just put it behind a black brick or
they
something.
put a Wario block. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and they don't
God.
hint at it, do they? I don't think they do.
No.
Yeah, it's just like figure it out, asshole. Oh, now you know.
Also-
Well, go back to the changing room.
Also, they put a no fun allowed wall in the little alcove after the slide, so you can't jump kick onto it. You have to do the slide.
On the positive side, that did mean that I had to actually experience the slide for once because I mean I don't actually mind the slide; it's kind of fun, but I always autopilot to not do it. I just can't help myself.
I guess in defense, quote unquote, of the power ups, not really, but it's more like I understand why they might do that. My thought with SM64, the original, it's a very weird game that, but I think this sort of makes sense in that pretty much all the power ups is just, or all the power ups except Metal Cap and Vanish Cap are like weird alternate handling models. They're just like the wing cap is this. Oh, it's this weird alternate handling thing you do. The shell riding is like that. Lava bounces are like that. And my thought was always, oh, well, the metal cap should probably have Mario handled differently, and have you maybe have more weight or something like that. And I guess, and Wario is kind of that in a way, but it's just it's not used in any way that is fun or interesting.
I mean, he just sucks ass to control. There's
Yeah.
nothing interesting they could have done with that. It just feels objectively worse.
Yeah.
Like they just They just took all the numbers and they brought them down for him, and they're like, yep, there you go, have fun.
I'll say the fact that the character that you answer with decides which power-ups you get, right? That's Ang was like jokingly in his in one of the reviews he was saying, yeah, it's sort of routing. It's actually sort of actual routing because like it's a little more ambiguous how each star might be easier to get with which power-up, right? But I feel like it just never got to a place where that was that interesting or like really like I think we all agree, okay, the alt handling of one of those power-ups is not really as enjoyable as just doing with Mario, right? So and the Mario's movement is just so rich that I don't know.
I mean, all the Luigi just breaks everything because
Yeah.
he's just so insanely better. Like he's so much stronger than the level design. It's like not really fun in the sense of like with Mario, it's usually like you kind of have to like think and do some precise maneuvering to like skip to like get over stuff or whatever you need
I
to
also
do.
decided that Mario is the only one that can wall jump, which
Yes.
Lord
Oh
knows why.
god! Oh god!
Well, because
Like,
that's the
why
only.
would you limit a move? I know the move's not as fun as it is to use as in the original, but it's the fucking wall jump. Why would you want to take that away from the rest of the cast and make
Wall
that
kicks
only
will
like
not work.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the thing is like that's one of the few moves that actually like is tightly tied to the terrain and makes you sort of consider the terrain, especially walls are not necessarily something you're interacting with a lot otherwise. So having only Mario deal with that, it's now of course you don't need to with Luigi, and then Yoshi's sort of Yoshi's a very strange character.
Yoshi's the routing character.
Well, it is funny. I think I was out for a bit, so I don't know if y'all already said this or not. But Yoshi being
no.
The coin, like his ability to like secure the coins made it so I was using him all the time in the 100 coin stars because he's just like, oh, okay, here's this enemy that otherwise might. Because losing a coin falling off an edge is like the worst thing ever. Especially not that the stages are quite as tight as in this one because of all the additions that generally add more coins. But yeah, his ability. Also, the fact that Yoshi can't pick up items, or punch, which seems so pointless usually, and then you run into situations where you actually sort of need it. It's like, oh, this is so. And
Routing.
the fact that he can't, exactly. Because then I would just play Yoshi all the time because you can enter a level and then just instantly switch to any character at the start, which is like
which baffles me. Why is he the only one that's allowed to on the mission select screen shoot just change to any other character? Why can't anyone else do that?
Even lore wise, I don't understand it because like the other characters they can still put on the caps. Like Wario can still turn into Mario. So
yeah, it's true.
I don't know.
It's just
very interesting.
I remember even as a kid that was just like that was the thing that I just detested so much was having to go back to the changing room constantly because I wasn't as smart as Pan. I wasn't routing at that age, so I would pick Mario or Luigi, and then inevitably there'd be here play as Wario, you got to play as Yoshi or something, and it's like, well, damn, I got to go back to the fucking changing room. It's just.
Well, I mean, they're pretty good about giving you the caps in every level. Like you can go find them. And it shows you on the map.
Enough. I wasn't smart enough at that.
Well, yeah.
At that age. Yeah.
So,
but yeah.
I'm sad that Alan just had to leave us because I was about to make a vibes argument. I find it terrifying that like you put the cap on and then your character still makes like their original noises. Holy shit!
Actually, you're totally right about that.
Oh my god,
that's a decision.
That is so insanely off-putting. I hate it. It's so bad. That's
it makes me
and it's the worst. I mean, you do it the most with Yoshi, and it's certainly the worst with him. It just sounds like it's like you're just like this. There's some problem going on with the guy you're playing. So you're playing as Luigi, and you're hearing like this squeaky, but also kind of croaky voice because it's the DS, and the shitty audio quality. So you're hearing this kind of like dying dinosaur, whenever you do a jump as Luigi. I'm like, what the fuck's going on?
Okay, I'm playing some more now that I this is the first time I played DS since I actually played a ton of 64, and
this game's
back to Doom. I'm back to Dooming again. You cannot triple jump off of a slope. Like
Yes.
normally in the original game, you can do
Yes.
1,
True.
2,
Yeah,
and then the
yeah.
third jump is allowed to be off of a slope. You will not allowed to do that. Triple dive has been removed
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I don't know why. The aerial kick just feels weird.
Yeah.
It feels like you don't have it. You don't really have very much. It doesn't give you nearly as much control over your sort of aerial trajectory, which is kind of the point of it in the original. You get like
Yep.
you get one time to basically stall yourself or redirect yourself a little bit.
I think that in general there's something
Oh,
odd going
God.
on with how the game decides between a dive and a kick in DS. I can't quite put my finger on it. And 64 was like, well, okay, the amount of momentum we have kind of decides if it's a dive or not.
I bet it's tied to the dash state or some nonsense.
No,
it's not.
that game.
Yeah.
Good game.
I'm sorry. I do agree
That's
with
nice to
the
see.
thing Pang said that, and I think I mentioned this at the beginning, is that this game is probably like it is significantly better than almost all of the 3D platformers just by inheritance.
The fact that you can go into detail about all of these mechanics at all is sort of a testament to how much is still there, right?
I hate having to concede on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I'm trying to think of what. I was playing Banjo-Kazooie recently as well. That is fucking.
Oh my god, that's like swagless,
my
bitchless,
God.
sauceless.
I'm not a fan of that game.
God.
That's like literally point and click adventure coded.
It is.
Sorry,
It is insane.
Banjo-Kazooie
It
fans.
is the
Hear
most
this?
British 3D
They
platform.
went that route, especially in the sequel. Like Banjo-Tooie just is a point and click fucking game. Like even how like you solve the puzzles and you identify that there is a puzzle, and then you have to figure out what you need to do. It's always just put key A into hole A. It's just like Jesus Christ.
I think
I don't know.
It's rough.
There's some charm to me with the original. I'm not as big of a hater on the original as some of you, but man, Banjo-Tooie though, just like it really just magnifies the point and click aspects.
No one likes that game. Well, and sort of what I was reflecting, I was like, I think I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but this game's obscure anyway. But one of the ones I had most fun playing my little jaunt was Super Magnetic Neo, and
yeah,
and
I've
even
always
that's
wanted
like
to play that. I've never gotten around to it.
it is very. I mean, it's like a Crash like, except with this magnetism mechanic. And it's got the best you can say about it, like movement wise, is there's there is momentum on a lot of the magnetism elements because usually they'll move whenever you activate them, and so it'll actually depending on when you like swing off of a particular thing or like fly, jump off a rail or whatever, it actually will change your speed and whatever, which can be very jarring. But that's it. It's like I summed up all of the sauce in one line, and most of what I had to say good about it was the scenario design, which I thought was very surprisingly strong and varied, and especially for a game of that otherwise like very cheap caliber. When you come to 64 DS, it's like even though I think we all have our critiques of it, it's like it's still there's a lot there. There's meat. It might be a little freezer burnt, but it is it's still something you can chew on there.
The Pang food analogy is like that's one thing you can count on.
I don't know why my brain always goes that. I don't cook. But every fucking time.
The real issue, I feel like, is the things he had said at the very beginning, which is like, why would you ever play this game anymore? Is like, because you could make an argument as on content, like, oh, it has new content. But Mario 64 has one of the most like established modding scenes of any game. And it basically has any type of like custom geometry hack you could think of that you would want. So, which are all higher quality than the original content by leaps and bounds of DS. So it's sort of like, what's the point?
Yeah,
it does have the benefit of portability, but obviously with the Switch, it's like, well, okay, that argument isn't as well, not quite as strong anymore, unfortunately.
Well, I hope you bought that fucking game when it came
the
out.
All-Star.
It got delisted.
See, if you have
it's on the
unless you want to pay $60. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about playing the DS version, you probably have a 3DS, and then you probably have a hack 3DS, and then you can probably play the home report of the original, right? Which
Oh,
is
that's so
actually
true.
awesome. Like I've been playing that. And it's a really great way to play the original. Yeah. I guess
mean,
maybe. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I will say, I mean, I was playing this very like as a before bed game. Run 2 stars. It does fit very well in the handheld format. Which
Yeah.
If we take the, I guess like the old handheld like design strategy of just divvy up your game into small discrete scenarios that you can quickly tackle and are satisfying when you beat just a couple at a time. And like, yeah, I think 64 was always very well built around that paradigm.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like, yeah, you could. It does look great on my original DS. Not that's how I originally played it, but playing it this time on an original DS, it looked rather clean.
Yeah.
But that's only going to matter to people like us who are like, oh man, I really love the way that I really hate the way the 3DS fucks up the dimensions on this, and you have to completely ignore the decomp port to the 3DS.
Yeah.
So it's a hard sell.
That's kind of the angle that I maybe want to wrap up with, because you can sort of, from a 2004 perspective, I can, like we implied, like I can totally see why this seemed like a great idea. Like a great move, strategy, whatever, as a launch title, right? It immediately establishes the DS as like, ooh, shit, this could be like serious games,
Well, compared to the PSP, like they had to, I can see that they had to make a pretty strong, pretty strong argument for their 3D prowess, and it looks, frankly, I know this is also an unpopular opinion. In some ways, I sort of get the lay epic liminal spaces appeal of the original, but you can definitely tell they've grown their hardware chops from the 64 era, and the textures are much cleaner, the models are more detailed, and don't rely quite as much on the they're actually textured more, less garage shading or whatever they're using on 64. That was like almost the entirety of Mario's character than like the eyes, right? It's quite a good. I know aesthetically, it's probably will not appeal to quite as many. I mean, if you're in that like brain, the brainworms separate from ours, where we're like mechanics brainworms people, and then there's people who are like they fucked up the soul so bad in 64 DS
Thor
by
high
making the Thor high heels approach to this. Then yeah, it's not going to look as good. I think as a hardware statement for the time, it was rather strong. Obviously, the PSP is still a lot more powerful on that front, but yeah, it is sort of hard to. It's not like say Ocarina of Time, which I think is sort of the 3DS equivalent of this, where it actually I think a decent amount of people they made mechanical improvements in some ways, at least for the casual player.
It's a totally viable alternative to the original.
Yeah. Now they did that one's less so because the frame rate they fucked it up. They made it 30.
It just makes me wonder. I think the angle of like, ooh, this like legendary game you already know is like now portable. It makes a lot of sense. I guess I just can't help but think, damn, long term, wouldn't it have been better to make an original game with like this kind of engine, to like
Maybe,
where
you still could have blown people away with like a 3D Mario game on a DS that wasn't Super Mario 64, but like made with the D-pad and the changes you went with, in mind. Like you could have made something more like what Super Mario 3D Land was.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, I was about to bring that up. It's like I don't know if I prefer a 3D Land on original DS compared to what 64 DS is.
I mean, divorce 3D Land from like from how much you like the game.
Yeah.
Well, and also 2004 Nintendo was very different from the
3D Land. I just kind of meant like just an actually brand new 3D Mario game that somehow, shape, or form is a good fit for the platform.
Because then you could have made new level design that like works with the limited angles, right? And that would have solved half the issue.
Even like a literal direct sequel to SM64 with the same engine and like just
Yep.
different levels.
Yeah. We needed the Galaxy 2 for
Yeah, that type of thing.
64.
128.
It's so fun. Oh, but bro, it's Pikmin. Didn't you watch the Did You Know Gaming on it?
Oh, didn't you watch Beach Gen
I
Game
will
Club?
never understand
Oh,
the
so
bizarre
true.
like logistics people had for thinking that like like Super Mario 128 was like an actual game. Like you guys remember that, right? Like on YouTube, like over 10 years ago, far over 10 years ago, there were just so many people that were convinced that like Super Mario 128 was an actual Mario game in development and it was canceled or
The
something.
beta of
Yeah.
Mario 128. That was like a whole meme, right? That like Unseen64, that website, where I think the owner of it is like
Yeah,
ESL, and they didn't understand that like beta doesn't mean like anything pre-release or literally everything
Yeah.
pre-release. It's just they just use the word beta in a really funny way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I would like to mention these there's some very quick summaries I have sentence long summaries from some game reviewers at the time for Super Mario 64 DS. There's some
Oh
good
yeah.
there's some good reviews here. Okay, so my gamer gave it a 76 and said, without a doubt, the Nintendo DS is an amazing new piece of hardware. It is just a shame that Nintendo has a port for their launch game. Plus, the game does not even use some of the system's specialties, like the microphone. Damn, imagine if Super Mario 64 DS, like the main game, used the microphone for something.
Well, yeah, you use the microphone to blow up the balloon that you used to fly around with Mario.
Yes.
Can
You
you
can
not
also
use it
use the
for the
microphone to
pedals
just
my
in the
gamer
game?
was
scream
capping.
in pain when you have to switch to Wario,
Yeah, so true.
We also have Games TM gave it an 80 and said, by far the most pleasing aspect of Super Mario 64 DS is the consistent quality of the new mini games, with the bombs and the catapult game adding something to dip into alongside the lure of the main adventure. So the most pleasing aspect, you gave it an 8. A pretty good score, but the absolute best thing you're labeling this remake doing is, man, those mini games.
That review was
Which
ahead of its time.
Yeah, I've heard that opinion from so many Zoomers. Sorry, but I've heard it so much. Just being like, man, the mini games though, and it's like,
I think Pang agrees.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, I played a lot of this.
I'm not
And I mean,
saying they're all-
because
There's a
yeah.
few good mini games, but I'm just saying it's like, man, what a not great remake if the highlight here is like some touchscreen mini games.
I'm gonna go for a low blow here, but I'm not hearing this from someone who plays weekly Mario Party.
He's got a point
Straight-
though. It's true,
Straight
but
for the fucking nuts. I mean, it was fun in daycare.
Hey,
Download play
hey,
was awesome.
it's not weekly anymore. Okay, it's monthly. We had to change, but
Okay.
times change. But
sorry to hear
last
that.
one here is GameZilla gave it a 93 and said
Oh.
a hoot of a game. That's it. A hoot of a game.
Oh man.
Damn. Okay.
I think that's a good note to wrap up on. Yeah. So, like I said at the start, we considered DS Beach Gen. I think 2004 is like it's still too in there to not consider it, right? Maybe
I think Beach Gen lasts until at least like 2005 because that's when the 360 would come out in the holidays.
pretty easy, yeah. I mean, I was even thinking like I could go for like 2008 or something, yeah, like go crazy.
Maybe.
There
Like,
was
can we do
like
portable third, please? 2011. It's not too late. It's on an engine that debuted in like.
that
06
actually
or
is one we're kicking around. I think I'd be okay with that. There could be a
no. We got to cover actual. There's actual Beach Gen Monster Hunters. We would have to
yeah, but those are like kind of bad.
leave it to. I think what we always said the Monster Hunter cast of this is like you don't even have to hop on. We'll just fucking riff for like 3 or 4 hours, and you just edit the best ones out. We'll just be playing while we talk. We're just like, oh, this is such a good game. Oh, this is some fucking bullshit. Oh,
It's funny because
oh, my
like
fucking god.
literally for some reason Monster Hunter is like the most consistent fucking discussion topic in our group. You know, it's actually impressive.
Unfortunately, yes.
It says they're good games. Y'all are wash. Y'all cannot be mechanics gamers and not love these games.
Yeah, so if you have other DS, PSP games you want to see covered, if you have other Beach Gen edge cases, maybe. I mean, this kind of is an edge case because like it's a 5th gen game technically. Yeah, let us know. Hope you enjoyed, and have a great summer.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.